You can unlock this tree, and yes, I have experimented with this in PvP. Yes, I do like it, and yes, I'll make a video on that as well. Welcome back, everybody. We are back with another Necro farm build, and I recently covered a Necro farm build the last time I was on it. However, we now have 2 additional slots as well as new essences, so I've updated the build, and it's actually even faster than the previous one, so I think everybody's going to enjoy it. Let's go ahead and just go right into it. Sometimes these go on for a while as we explain everything in detail. So Mirror Ictus, and this is going to give our skeletal champions a nice upgrade, which I have not used in previous versions of the farm build. This is going to give them a range capability, so they'll be able to pick off kind of mobs that are lingering, as well as you can send them out ahead, and they do more damage than the traditional skeleton. I'm using Ethereal Boundary, and this is going to have Wraith Form remove all effects which cause loss of control or decrease movement speed. Very rarely do you get benefit from that in PvE. The main reason we're using this here is for the Essence Mastery level, this 3.6% cooldown reduction, and if you have it awakened, you'll get some even greater cooldown reduction, so that's why I've got this piece on. There's another choice for Wraith Form here, which does the exact same things in regard for the Essence Mastery and the Awakening property, and it just allows 2 more additional wraiths to go out. Really doesn't matter which one you use, just pick one of them. I like this one because occasionally you're snared or slowed. I have Synod's Anointing, and this is going to increase our skeletal mages by 1, as well as reducing the cooldown. The skeletal mage life isn't a huge deal, as far as I know, for any resonance, but in general, the additional charge is nice because these skeletal mages, when empowered, which we will have on a later essence, will have the ability to be summoned and actually clear a pack on their own, and we'll show that when we get into the gameplay. So having an additional charge of that allows you to drop them in 2 separate locations. They're also really nice if you have one active and a pack spawns later than when you get there, because it'll actually clear the pack out while you're in a different location, and that's really underrated for farming in circles or loops or anything in that regard. Now we're using Proximal Fear, and this is a change from my older builds as well. This is going to cause enemies to flee, and it also damages them, and it doesn't show it here, but on the tooltip, at least for my character, it shows about 22,000 damage, but it in fact does a lot more than that. It's also going to increase the Wraith Form damage from your Essence Mastery, as well as an Awakening effect. So in general, at least at very high resonance, this does substantial damage, especially to PvE trash mobs. So very good. You can actually just activate this and run through regular mobs and take them out. So it really increases your clear speed. There's a new option here as well, which I do want to make mention of, and that is the new targeted Wraith Form teleport, and not Pitiless Pace. We've had this one where you could teleport. This is actually the option here where you can now quickly transport to your target. You have to have a target in order to use this, meaning there has to be a hostile enemy or player. When you get there, you'll deal damage and fear. And the reason that I prefer the Proximal Fear over these pants is actually because I don't need an enemy next to me, meaning if I'm trying to catch up to the group or just travel somewhere across a big gap where there are no enemies, I find that the Proximal Fear functions better for the overall farm build. That doesn't mean that this won't see any use. In fact, if you're doing really tight circles or small loops, such as say the popular Frozen Tundra loop, this may actually perform better. So keep that in mind. Is definitely an option. But for the majority of things, I find that this pair is in fact better. Desolatoria, now this is going to summon the Molten Golem. Still very strong for farming. This is empowering the skeletal mages. Like I said, very strong with the Synod's Anointing paired together. This is going to give those skeletons the capability to just clear a pack on its own. Revenant Wind is going to do some additional damage to nearby enemies when we activate Wraith Form, meaning that if we have a mob at really low life, we don't have to linger around to kill it. We can just pop Wraith Form, let this finish it off, and move on to the next pack. Finally, we're using Dominance of Dust in conjunction with that Desolatoria, and the combination of the two, at least if you have the pieces awakened, will actually reduce your cooldown to a point where you can summon your golem and have a 100% uptime of either the solo golem or the double golem when it splits. So you don't need any additional cooldown reduction, which is why I haven't put a golem essence on my helm. There are a lot of essences for the helm that you could slot in place of the Mirror Ictus. However, I find that the additional damage on the skeleton champions is actually better overall for the build. Now, if you don't have 100% uptime on the golem, you might want to swap that out, and that's up to you to kind of discover on your own or see what that threshold is, so to speak. So you'll see that I, in fact, still have golems here mixed within my army, and when these go down, well, I can just recast the original, and so I always have this golem active. So let's go ahead and just pick a spot here. Usually this spot is pretty open, so let me take a look here, and we'll just show some quick gameplay and show. All right, there was somebody finishing a bounty there, so I told them to finish, and then I would kind of take over when they were out of the way. So I can use Wraith form just to travel, and that's a benefit over the other pair of pants because, like I said, you need a target to use the other pair. And here I can just leave a skeletal mage to take out that small pack. I can jump my golem in here. I can travel again with Wraith form without having to target anything and just Wraith through them essentially. This pack hasn't quite respawned yet. I can leave a mage, it spawns as I'm there. And I can always throw my champions just to have them shoot out some ranged attacks. And you'll see that I can basically keep moving. And even if there's enemies, I don't really care. I don't have to stay or linger and finish them off. I can actually move very rapidly. And I've farmed with several Crusaders since then. And I can keep pace with the Crusaders, which is usually kind of the standard for a lot of people. Can you keep up with the horse or not? Whereas kind of the wizard has set the new pace, so to speak. But in general, Crusaders is still kind of remembered for its remarkable clear speed, at least for farming. So very, very good build, very quick, got a lot of fun, enjoyable skills, and to be honest, in terms of kind of how tedious it is to utilize the build, this is my favorite build so far for farming on Necromancer, although there were some other effective builds that had come along the way in my various visits on the Necro class. A lot of times they felt clunky or tedious to kind of use in action, and this one's just been great. It's really smooth, very easy. You have a number of abilities to drop, and it really doesn't matter which one you just use whatever's available. So there you have it, guys. Super effective build for farming. Easily the most fun farm build for Necro that I've had to date. Just feels much smoother than the other builds in the past. I use 4-piece Shepherd and 2-piece Banquet for set pieces. Just want to show that off as well while we're here. What you have in those slots doesn't so much matter with a lot of people entering the new difficulty. Doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you get those set pieces. The benefits of the set are actually more important than the stats as long as you exceed the combat rating. So even if they're poorly rolled or you have previous pieces from, say, H8, those will be fine as long as you're over that combat rating. For the Paragon tree, I'm using Massacre, and the key here is just to have all the active abilities. This will give you increased movement speed when you're not in the Wraith form, as well as increasing the timer for the kill streak, some additional attack speed, and so forth. And another thing in regards to Paragon trees that I mentioned in a video earlier in the week is that I mentioned you could unlock Weaver. Well, you can also unlock Executioner. You just need somebody or group of players capable of clearing the later raids. So if you have somebody or can get a carry and so forth, you can unlock this tree. And yes, I have experimented with this in PvP. Yes, I do like it. And yes, I'll make a video on that as well. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch and have a great day.